Welcome back to the Berg podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And Dylan.
Hey.
And this morning we're talking about estimating and backlog and how you have to sort of just constantly feed the machine, right? Just like everything. Like the body always needs fuel, your car needs fuel, and the business needs fuel. And for us, that fuel is the estimating process and winning bids and getting them to the field, right?
Yeah. And it's a pretty straightforward process, right? That we're all familiar with. We get an opportunity to put a price to something. We put a price to it. We come to terms, sign it, and then everybody goes and does the work. And sort of that's the way people portray it. But there's so much more to it than that because it's not that simple. Like first you gotta, Dylan and I gotta look at it and say, is this someone we want to work for? Is this a job we want to do? Is it a location we want to do? And then if all of those things are right, in theory, when is the next opening, right? Like, can we bid it and can we do it? So first, can Dylan put together the number in a fashion that we're going to be able to get it to the owner when they want it? And if he could, when do they want to do the work? Does it fit into our schedule long term? And that's really where the struggle comes in, is trying to figure that out. And that's why, when we say estimating and backlog, they go hand in hand because you're looking at it and your backlog is always going down. Like as long as everything's going well, you're burning backlog. So that means you have to replenish it at least a rate as great as what you're depleting it. And that's cyclical, depending on time of year and what we're doing. But it's also job starting, so sometimes a job doesn't start, but you still need to keep bidding. And you get into these rubs that is the issue between operations and estimating is that give and take where we're going to try and feed as much work as possible. And at times we'll make, Stetson and Joe and Anthony nervous because we just keep feeding work into the machine and we haven't done enough work. But we don't know when anything's going to start. It's in theory when they're going to start once you win, which is a whole other process of getting to the finish line. That's become significantly more difficult. The contracts today are much more difficult to negotiate. We've developed a tool that enables us to do it a little bit more efficiently, but there's some key terms that we don't want to agree on. You know what I mean? Like realistically, there's some key terms that owners want to have that we don't want, and then our subs don't want to have that we do want. So there's a whole other piece to that. But Dylan, in estimating, has why don't you talk about what it feels like for estimating as it comes on, when we feed you jobs, the duration, so that people can sort of get a feel for what that feels like on a daily basis?
So I would say it depends on the job too and the size of it. Like, so if it's I don't want to say a smaller project, but something that's not as large scale as some of these like land development projects, you might be able to turn a bid around. I mean, if you look at Scott, he can turn a bid around depending on who it is, who the client is. He knows the plans for the most part within a week. I feel like I'm getting there to get to that point, but on average, it's probably a solid at least 3 weeks, if not, a month to, go from your first initial email from the client or whoever wants you to do the work, and then till it's finally formally submitted. And then 2, you might run into where you get all the way to the finish line and then they do a bid extension because they've added 4 pages of changes or spec differences. And then you got to go back through, see how much it actually impacts your bid. Does it increase it? Does it decrease it? Does it make it better for you? Can you add alternate stuff? It's a process. I'd say it's probably a solid, at least 3 weeks, if not 4.
Yeah. And so one of the funny things is, the field always feels that we give them a job and we say, you got to go, right? Like we need to get production. We need to get this done. How can we be efficient? And I don't think they realize that the same thing happens inside these 4 walls. Like in other words, Dylan says he's going to need 4 weeks to put a bid together that's solid. He's had time to go over it. He knows the prints. He knows the specs. He knows the scope. He has quotes from his subs and material vendors. Find the cheapest place. It's going to take 4 weeks. And how many weeks do you think you normally get?
2.
Yeah, right. So you get 2. So, it used to be, and in some cases on certain jobs, we know it's coming, right? So we can do like some legwork ahead of time, find material, identify some opportunities. We see an early look at a plan set before they're out. But more and more over the last 2-3 years, we see that you don't see a set of, well, I'm not even going to say constructible, but like 4 bid prints until 2 weeks before. And they're like, okay, can you get me a number, can you get me a number in 10 days? And we're like, we are immediately negotiating. Like usually for us at this point, the first step is to say like, okay, well, there was somebody else who gave us a bid 2 weeks ago that said they needed it in 2 weeks. So that's this week. So I have to get them the bid. So I really can't start yours until I get this bid out the door, and trying to juggle that to say to the owners, like, when do you really have to have it? And can we fit? And at times we just have to not bid stuff that we'd like to bid. And at other times we need to call clients that we have existing relationships with and say like, hey, can we just push this another week because we have something else putting some pressure on us? And it's stressful because if you make a mistake and you win, and if you make a mistake and you lose, that's not great. But all you did was reduce opportunity to make money and build backlog, which isn't good. But if you make a mistake and win, now you've got a problem, because now we're going to hand that job. Dylan's going to come to me and we're going to go over it and we're going to look at the problem, the miss, and say, okay, we missed it. What are we going to do? Figure out the actual cost of that miss. And then we're going to feed that to Stetson on the commercial side, or Scott would feed it to Anthony on the other side. And we're going to say, okay, here's what we missed. Here's how we think we can mitigate this. And then whatever the duration of the project is, that miss sticks with you all the way to the end. Because even if it was a miss in the very early, make it that something simple. You missed the construction entrance. All right, you missed it. It happens right in the beginning, but you don't actually know if the job dead breaks even. Well, you could have made a couple $1,000s if you had just not missed the construction entrance. Or maybe there's an opportunity and you do really well. You still did miss that item, but it doesn't hurt you as bad. So misses that you win are the most dangerous of the misses, and they're sort of what keep estimators up at night, is thinking about, do I have everything?
Or it's like even after, we won the one project down at the landfill, and, that was the first like big win that I've had in my estimating career. And the first thing I thought of was, well, what the heck did I miss? Like, what did I not see that somebody else did that allowed me to get underneath their number? I mean, we were close. It was all a competitive bid, but why am I low? Why did I look at this a different way? Did they look at it some way different? Am I, too ambitious? Am I too safe? Like, that's one of and like Dan can speak. I come up there and ask him all the time, like, questions, or I'll call Gary and say, hey, here's what I have in my mind. Is this actually how it's going to go? Or is it going to completely unravel in the first 30 seconds if we try to do this? And most of the time, I have a decent understanding. YouTube has been a big help understanding some of the processes that I haven't experienced yet. But just going from, once you get the award, okay, it's great, but where was everybody else? Like, they're not probably going to give you that information. They're not going to tell you, oh, you won it at 3.1, but the next one was 4.5. Like, they're not going to tell you that. But at least if you're within 2%, 3%, 5%, then okay, you're in the ballpark, you have a good number. Then I think that's kind of where then you can kind of, take a sigh of relief, like, okay, that was a good number. We were all looking at it the same way.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing with it too is, so you identify work you want to do. You're able to get it in a time frame where you can get the pricing you need from your suppliers and your subs. And you're able to put that number together. And then you're able to get it to them in time. And then you're able to win. And then you have to negotiate the contract, right? To get to terms that we can all agree upon, right? And the terms are usually pretty straightforward, right? Like, you and I go through it, and it's going to kick out pages and pages, depending on how long the contract is. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we get paid. And then we want to make sure that the owner getting, the GC getting paid is not the contingency for us to get paid, right? Otherwise, we're financing the project. And then we try and pass that risk down as well, where we say, like, we'll pay our subs and suppliers. We'll pay our subs as soon as we get paid. Suppliers, that doesn't work. Like, suppliers, they get paid when they bill you. 30 days later, 45 days later, they're getting paid. That's it. So we're already financing a piece of the project, but what we're trying to avoid in that contract stage is, in my mind, two real things. One, financing the project for a GC or owner. And two, creating unnecessary liability for us. Because that's one of the other common thing that you and I have always seen is they're going to try and take the liability and put it on us. And the funniest one is always that we're responsible for their negligence. And if you don't catch it, you're responsible for their negligence because you signed the contract. So, then you got to wade through that. After you get all that done, contract signed, the ink is dry, you have your pre-con, you meet conservation, you get on site. Now is when everything that we perceive to be our work really happens. And it's still, as an estimator and as a project manager, this is again why you don't sleep at night. We got a couple projects going right now that there's a bust. And there's a physical bust where the plans of the existing conditions do not exactly match the actual existing conditions. It's not unsuitable, it's just wrong. And so trying to manage that, because it has an impact now on our cut fill, on our dirt quantities, on all of our numbers. There's another project that we're running where we assumed that there was 8 inches of topsoil, and the owner was fine with that. And there ended up being a geotech report that was not provided and may not have been available at the time of bid that said there'd be significantly more. There is significantly more. And now it completely changes the operation. So the operation changes, the needs changed, all of that change. So I think one of the benefits, if Dylan and I, and you sit down and talk once a month or so about it, is just talk through some of the general stuff of how we do it, why we do it, and let people hear it. Because I think if the site that I'm talking about, the second site, if you go to that site, you could see that there is a likelihood that there is deeper topsoil. But we were told to anticipate 8 inches of topsoil. We anticipated 8 inches of topsoil. We contractually told them we anticipated 8 inches of topsoil. But now the crew in the field has to deal with it and figure out how to get it done, while then we back into the office and Stetson and Dylan and I try and figure out how to deliver to the owner a solution, right? Like, okay, you now have a problem or two based on this occurring. Here's how we say we can best attack that problem and move the project forward at the most cost-effective rate. And I think that's another big step in the learning curve as an estimator is how to do that piece. And we're working through that now. And one of the first times we really hit it, because, landfill public work can be different because you just run in excess. Like they told me what to bid, I bid what they told me to, so they own it.
Whereas now, like, yeah, you gave them a price based on your assumptions, but, your production rates based on one depth is drastically different than once you, exceed, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches over what you estimated. Well, that's a whole different operation. That's a whole different package. That's, more man hours, more crew hours. It doesn't exactly equate to a 1-to-1.
Right.
And that's, the hardest part to try to portray sometimes, to the client, to the field, like, hey, we know we have this change, and then it goes into the whole tracking side. And once, you get the change order approved, it goes down through all the channels, and then you start getting into like the data tracking of it, and like the two different, okay, this is a different production rate than this one is. So you got to make sure you put your time where it's supposed to go, and not just in the same stripping topsoil bucket.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing that's interesting, it falls almost on like it's not a Brian responsibility, but it's something that you would be really comfortable with, is the way we play with math on the backside. And I was talking to Stetson yesterday, and he'd brought me, we were changing the crew that we intended to do the work based on what we thought we could do. And so we could extend the duration by reducing the crew. So we felt that the production rate, the loading rate, the hauling rate, not rate dollars, but rate production, that we could meet based on the terms actually made more trucks less viable, and that we could actually be just as efficient with less trucks. We would not move as much dirt, but we felt that the cycle time would work. And so we're trying to work through it. And he had written a couple things down. He was like, something's wrong here. And it doesn't make sense, because your math says in the bid that here, if I used 4 trucks, it would be this, 3, it would be this, 2, it would be this. And any of them could work based on the package, so long as you hit these corresponding production rates, which is how we generally operate, right? We'll bid it one way, but mathematically we know there's a few options of how we could do it, and we try and make sure they're all covered and that they work, so that once we get to the field, we can address that. And we realized that I had bid it on a 9-hour day, and Stetson were working 10s. So he was looking at a 10-hour day. So his production rate was greater than mine, but was greater just by the 1 extra hour. But that is one of the things, like, it's a numbers thing. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, these are all just calculations, right? It's how fast can we do it? How, if the truck's going to go 15 miles an hour and it's going to drive a quarter mile and it's going to take 2 minutes to dump and 2 minutes to load, then you try and build in, okay, so then the cycle time is X. How long does it take to load that truck? And how many trucks do you need? Is there a pinch point in the road? And so much of the estimating is a really odd combination from a skill set standpoint of good math skills and good projection of what you think is going to happen, and then a firm understanding of how the work gets done. And it's one of the things I really appreciated, honestly, both about Dylan Clemis and about Dylan Reese, was they were methodical in looking at the roadblocks, the problems. Okay, yeah, you could run that turn, but what about this? And whereas I would be a little more cavalier with it, and I would say we are going to do it this way, and we'll widen the road. We'll take a different route. But at times that puts a lot of stress on the field. And I think that Dylan does a really good job of trying to really avoid pain for the field once it gets there and anticipate it, and then bring it to me. And then he's got to deal with me trying to say okay, but I think you're going to need to go a little faster in order to be competitive, and that's one of the fun parts for me, honestly, is going over stuff with Dylan. We were going over waste excavation, and not something Dylan's done a lot of. And we sort of went through that, and I think I threw it at you, but I think you were able to pick it up and get what I would say in pretty quickly on how I would operate. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the YouTube videos I was watching. It was literally just, granted, they're not the same machines we have, the big, grousers and everything on them pushing the trash, but just what does that, do? And then talking to Stetson, it's have you ever pushed trash before? He said only a couple times, but it's not the same because stuff gets caught under the blade. It's not as clean of a motion as it is to, go outside and strip off topsoil, strip off fill material, whatever. So, you got to take those factors into account when you're coming up with your production rates. If you go back through, if you went downstairs to my desk right now, you could see I wrote on there 90% production is actually 100%, and then everything is based off of those. So we might have a 75% production rate for pushing material, but that 75%, if you compare it to the dirt, is probably only 60. So it's just a funny thing. And I was horrible at math in college and in high school. I failed calc my freshman year. I just couldn't grasp it, couldn't understand it. But, I think it was more because it was hypothetical. You're putting the alphabet into math, which shouldn't belong. But two, this is real world. You can physically, tangibly see, okay, 17.4 cubic yards goes into the back of a rock truck. I can push 3.8 yards with a 51. You can tangibly see and work that out in your head and say, okay, once you take it to from the plan set down, you can actually start to see, okay, how is this going to move? How is the operation? Okay, I got to make the red areas go to blue. I got to make the blue areas come back up to our subgrade or fill things in. So you can kind of piece it together and run through everything in your head before it even becomes before you even break ground. I've already sat there and tried to think through every kind of roadblock, or I'm not going to catch them all, but how the process of this is all going to go. And I'm not going to see the mobs and the demobs because of concrete crews in the way, building form is going in. But you're going to, from the estimating standpoint, you physically see the job start to finish, and you usually see that in 3 weeks, and you apply a cost to it, which is interesting to me. I it scratches your brain the right way.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing with it, too, is, you say a truck will hold 17.4, and let's make it dirt, not trash. It's just simpler. It's just soil or gravel. That's factual, depending on who's loading it, right? Who loaded it? Did they put 17.4 in it, or was it light? Or maybe they're really good and they really stocked it and it would actually carry a little more because it could without overflowing. Or did they miss and the dirt is everywhere? You know what I mean? They're throwing dirt. There's dirt on the roof of the truck, dirt on both sides. They got to clean stuff up.
Is that how you get more when you put it on the roof?
Well, the roof tends to blow off. I mean, I guess, are you trying to compact it, or are we just trying to get rid of it? If you're just trying to get rid of it, sure. Just, but the personnel. And that's something that at times when you get into bids, and you have time, you have those liberties. You can look at it and say, okay, what do we think our crew efficiency is. And I know there's a couple other companies that we know. I mean, Moschlitz is one of them that really is good at that piece of it. You know what I mean? Where they will factor in and say, okay, but how efficient will our crew be, right? In other words, so if the machine at 100% is this, let's bid it at 80%. That will be 80% effective, which is still really effective. But, you know, it's those little pieces that hurt the crews in the field. All of a sudden, you get to the end of a job, and if there's a miss, whose fault was it? Was it actually the field's fault? Or did the field actually perform it really well, and we just were too aggressive? Or we were, you forget missing, just too aggressive, or anticipated this perfect crew. There was a bunch of guys with 10,000 hours in the seat, and everything was going to go perfect, you know? Or did it rain? You know, or was there unsuitable? It's what's so hard. He said about not liking math, you know what I mean? And I was pretty good at math, but I didn't enjoy school, so it's a moot point anyway. But it's why at the end of the day, and people will get mad when I say it, but like I feel like an engineer is the safest place to be, because I draw what theoretically is, and I want you to build what theoretically is. And on paper, everything works because math works. So as long as you follow the rules of math, what you build on paper or on a computer or on a screen is accurate. It checks out. It's like a math problem that you did. But then we put it in the field, and it's completely different, you know, because can it actually happen?
Right.
And what's in our way? And those are all the things that we struggle with every day, trying to get good jobs to the field and to try and maintain backlog, you know, and internally you and I and the team throw around numbers that we know our backlog needs to be X. You know what I mean? Like you really want enough backlog to run you for, I mean, at least 9 months, right? Like you need at least, really in a perfect world, if you had a year and a half of backlog, that's where you want to live, because then you can comfortably bid. You can say, okay, we're bidding for 2 cycles out, right? We're not bidding for work for the fall. We're bidding work for next spring right now. And so we can be more selective about what we're bidding, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and the hard part there is, you know, you talked about like weather, how that complicates schedule, and when the owner is or isn't ready to actually go. And we're not like a lot of industries, right? I mean, 12 months of backlog would be fantastic, but in our situation, that's usually not feasible, at least not the way we handle it, because trying to get us to a spot where we know a project is estimated, awarded, and scheduled, but not going to be actually in production for the next 12 months
it just doesn't happen.
Is unrealistic in the way we normally do things. So to have enough of those to fill that 12th month, you know, like, so like, you know, like right now, like we talk about all the time, our backlog it continues to be healthy, but when things don't go when they're supposed to, or things, you know, have to start sooner than they're supposed to, and you try and jam them all in or add things on the fly because stuff that was supposed to happen didn't, it messes up that cycle for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, one of the spots that we didn't talk about that really, the best possible scenario for us in a lot of ways, we believe, is if we can get in early on a project and assist the owner or GC and try and design stuff and say, like, not engineering design, we can do that, but we're more looking to say, like, hey, this would make this project run more efficiently. Here's the roadblock we see we would hit that would make it more expensive if you address it ahead of time. You know, and we've done that on a couple projects and watched the GC themselves get smoked. You know what I mean? Like the GC, all of a sudden somebody else stomps in, blows their number out of the water, and takes advantage of all the ideas that we came up with for free with the GC doing it for free. You know, so that's what's really tricky about our business is most of these deals, if you could do it in like a design build setup early on, there's no guarantee you get the work.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, so like now you did was it better that you didn't touch it at all and you got 2 weeks to figure it out, or that you devoted, you know, off and on over a period of 6 months, you devoted a month's worth of time to a project that you actually had no shot at because someone came in and just lowballed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely better in my mind if you get to the potential work early, and you've got to budget it 3 or 4 times or more in order to get it to the finish line and build that relationship without giving away more than you have to necessarily.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, like if we figured out a plan or a process, it doesn't mean somebody else won't. But the more we can hang on to that carnal knowledge, so to speak, and so that we maybe have an advantage when it comes time to actually get an agreement signed is better for sure. But you've got to be essentially budgeting and rebudgeting for the work for long enough that you stay in the conversation,
Yep.
develop the relationship or maintain the relationship, and then get it to the finish line.
And two, it helps you like you build that relationship. Maybe some of them, they're not coming to us because we're going to be a dash one client to them. They're going to, this is probably something we've already done 3, 4, 5, 6 jobs with them. And, they'll come to us and say, hey, we've heard through the grapevine, we're working with, Joe Schmo down the road. He wants to build, this giant warehouse, but, we have this in the way, this in the way, this in the way. Can you guys help us navigate that? And, it builds you the relationship, one, with that client. So when he goes to build something else, hey, Berg did this for us. I'm going to reach out to them again, reach out to whoever the GC was on the project. But then also, too, if you're working hand in hand with engineers, I think we have a couple engineers we work with that, they'll be the ones that call us and say, hey, we got this site, we think it's balanced, but we need to get it through to, county approvals. They have to, escrow X amount of dollars. Can you guys give us an idea of what you think it'll be? And, we can sit there and, knowing that we'll get a chance to look at this job again. But it allows us to sit there and be like, okay, well, I know we saw this, this, and this. Hey, when we get the next, the 4 construction plans or the 80% plans, you can already kind of know what changes are going to happen, what they're anticipating, and why. And then you can kind of navigate that. Or, sometimes it affects your number because things are going to go slower. But at the same point, it also allows you to, hey, I know this is going to lay up this way. I can take this dirt from here and move it to here ahead of time. Right. Talking with, 4, 5, 6 different people on the project working together to get a furnished set of plans, it allows you to build long relationships with clients too, not just get those dash ones out of the way.
Yeah. Well, and that's the biggest piece of it. The biggest piece of what we have to do is communication. It's developing a relationship and communicating so that you can talk back and forth and try and stay in the conversation, right? That's all you're trying to do is just stay in the game enough that when they send you a print and say, I need this in 2 weeks, you're still one of the ones getting the print, so that's what's funny about it is it doesn't really give you any more time to bid. It gives you more advanced knowledge, which at times, like Dylan's saying, can be bad. I've lost jobs because I knew too much. Had I known nothing, I would have won. But it's the communication. That's the really big piece is taking the time to build relationships with people that they trust you, you trust them, and then hopefully that can keep you in the conversation. Then you got to bid it. Yeah.
Well, and balancing it. I mean, the communication is super important, but balancing that with the known fact that you can't just be doing one thing at a time. Yeah. I mean, because if we work on one bid at a time, we'll never bid enough things.
No. Or if it's going to slide too, like, hey, I can't, our backlog's full until, spring of 27. But they want you to bid a job that they're saying is going to start in October, November. Well, you can say, hey, look, do you really want to start in October, November? You're going to run into snow, ice, sleet, rain. You're going to be working in a mud pit. Like, depending on the winter, the last winter we had was nothing but, whiteout conditions, I feel like. So you could, I don't want to say lean into it a little bit and say, I probably wouldn't start this one until, spring, but it also allows you to, I don't want to say, influence their decision, but it allows you to, give your guidance a little bit and say, hey, this is a job we want to do. This is a job we want to work for the people we want to work for. But, in everybody's best interest, unless you want to open yourself up to unsuitable condition change orders right off the bat, I'd probably wait until August or April or May or, March.
If they have that luxury.
Correct. If it's able to, I would say, maybe look at it, we'll slide a couple months. It's not the grand scheme of things, whether your warehouse goes in October or January, it might have some benefits, but
it may actually not make a difference.
Correct.
That's part of the thing that people don't think about. Sometimes you rush to start stuff, and it doesn't actually help you because of weather conditions. But it's so unpredictable in that sense, and that's why the biggest thing is just when we try and do that, we can try and be honest and say, listen, we have, we're booked up. We'd love to do this job, but we don't think we can start it and then deliver. We're not going to be able to deliver on what we promised if we started in this window. We'd rather start it in a spring window. Part of the reason being weather, and part of the reason being our schedule. if they stick to it, that's where the team in the field starts to feel pressure, because then you almost have to take it. That's the hard part is sometimes when it doesn't fit your schedule and it says that you're going to be a little bit overbooked, you need to stay overbooked, because you don't know what's going to slide. How many times have we seen projects that people swear are going to start? I mean, we have one that should start in the next 2 to 3 weeks that was supposed to be done by like February 1st. Like, it hasn't even started.
Right.
So factoring that in, you got to understand that a lot of times you're taking on work that if you actually looked at it, it's like, okay, but what foreman are you going to put there on October 1st? And be like, I don't know. But I don't know where any of those jobs are going to be on October 1st. I just know what a schedule says right now with good weather from here through October.
Yeah. So
that's the other tricky part is, it was one of Reese's lines it's a Myers line about load the cart and forget the mule. You know what I mean? You have to keep loading the wagon with work, because if the machine's not fed, that's the one thing that stops it. You know what I mean? Too much work, we can get to a point and say, like, listen, we would love to start this job, but it's 4 weeks out. We are not going to be able to start the job on time. We can start it on this day, or you're going to have to go elsewhere. And that's the position we don't want to be in that position.
Or look for a way to add resources, or whatever the case may be. Yeah.
But what we don't want to do is be in a position where you're struggling to find work for people in 4 weeks. So given the choice, you have to overload and then try and manage the schedule.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like when you open up your pantry at home, you want to be able to look in there and have a choice of, at least for me, like a choice of snacks. So if like, okay, if you open it up and there's nothing there, so you get a little worried. You're probably like, I should probably go to the grocery store, estimate jobs. But if you got enough there, okay, it allows you to be a little more comfortable. I don't want to say you're not lax. Like, we're all, pushing to get to the finish line. I have a bid due Monday at 4:00 and, trying to send out an addendum last night at 4 p.m. So you got, 48 hours of work to do it before it's in. But at the same point, like, you can be a little more selective, a little more fine-tuned on, what snack you want to have. Do I want to go after the sinkhole that's going to be, really fun, 2 weeks a hit, but you don't know, could be 2 weeks, could be 2 months, or, you have a nice land development project that you could, you could look at the plans more in depth. You can figure some stuff out on that end.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
That's all the things that go into it. You know what I mean? And it's not something people see a lot outside of the office, but it's something I think if we sort of, in my view, this conversation with Dylan and you and I, it would be that we start talking about just what we do and how we do it. And then maybe we try and touch base monthly and just give everybody a feel for like what we're looking at. And we're not going to say job specific, but that we're bidding stuff, what we're bidding, what we're looking at, how things are looking, and just give people a temperature of where we are.
It's probably a good place to wrap it up for today. So thanks so much for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this, and we hope you come back for another episode.